Welcome to Sales Training for Podcasters, the podcast designed to better your sales process. We'll be sharing tools, tips, and techniques, whether you love sales or hate sales. If you've got a product or service to sell and a podcast, you've come to the right place. Now, here's your hosts, podcast strategists, Doug Sandler and JJ Flazane.
Welcome to Sales Training for Podcasters. Today's guest is Virginia Muzquiz. She's a Referral Diva, founder and chief connection officer at Master Connectors, Inc. With more than 2 decades of experience generating business by referral, Virginia has been teaching entrepreneurs and small business owners the art and science of filling their sales funnels with high-quality, on-demand referrals. She calls her process Referral Alchemy, and when fully implemented, it can quite literally infuse tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars into your business without a single dollar in ad spend. You see, most of the business owners in your network are running unconscious referral algorithms. They don't really think about you until someone asks for a recommendation, and then they drop your name. If you're lucky, you've met a couple of referral archeologists who keep you top of mind and are willing to dig in their network to see what opportunities they can find in their hidden Rolodex. And then there are the elusive referral alchemists who can seemingly make referrals appear out of thin air. Jim Rohn said that we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So if you want to hang out with the alchemists, you need to learn to be an alchemist. And that is what working with Virginia can help you do.
So ultra excited today because our good buddy, Virginia Muzquiz, she is here. And JJ and I have had a chance to get to know Virginia over the last several years. And she's not only a prolific podcaster, but she is the consummate salesperson. She understands the whole world of selling. I want to find out a little bit more about her resistance or lack of resistance to selling. Virginia, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Doug. Thanks, JJ. Great to be on.
I love having you here. And Virginia, what I think is so cool is that you're the kind of person that, and very similar to several of the guests that we've had, you really have a very no-nonsense approach. It's all about the relationship. It's all about honesty and openness with what you got and what you're selling and how you sell it. Did you ever have any resistance to the whole idea of selling?
To be honest with you, yeah. Early on, I actually did. So I started my sales career formally. I mean, I was always like, selling Girl Scout cookies or whatever, but the real formal sort of business I got through direct sales. And I had a really hard time, not so much selling the product, but it was really difficult for me to sell the opportunity because I felt like I was being manipulative a lot. And so I had some resistance to having those conversations not because I was afraid that people would say no, but because I was afraid that I would talk people into doing something that wasn't good for them. And that then they would hate me.
How were you trained, though, to overcome that? Or were you not trained, which is why you struggled with it?
Well, I struggled with it a lot because, in direct sales, they have that 3-foot rule, right? Like you're just supposed to offer it to everybody and they say yes, they say no, whatever. But they also dangle a lot of carrots and a lot of goodies and a lot of bonuses and those sorts of things that tend to, they're supposed to motivate, right? But they tend to generate that same sense of scarcity in you that a lot of times we have as entrepreneurs when we're just not selling, right? So you get that sort of, I want to accomplish this thing, and you lose track of the fact that the person on the other side of the table is a person and they have desires and they want to accomplish things, but you're just trying to get to your goal. And because I'm pretty driven like that, I had to learn to be careful about those conversations. And I actually learned that from Bill Barron. So I went to his, I can't even remember the name of his program. It was a great sort of how to sell without being salesy and pushy.
Yeah, well, that typically is where most people think that the sales game is played, in that pushy or manipulative type of approach. And I don't personally feel that way. I always feel like selling is really just building a relationship and then offering a service that you think would be of value to the person that's on the other side of either Zoom or other side of the table from you. When did you get to learn? Because I'm sure it came before a Bill Barron seminar for you. How did your relationship with money evolve? Was it something that, did you guys discuss it as a family as you were growing up? Was money always was there always some scarcity around money? Or tell me a little bit about how your relationship with money evolved even when you were young.
I had mixed messages. Both my parents are Depression era kids. So they were kids during the Great Depression. And So my mom told the tale of scarcity, the tale of there was never enough, but she also told the tale of generosity. So there was a story that she told about an old lady who would have starved to death, but my mother gave her the last of their bread and jelly, and her dad beat her for it or whatever, but that she never regretted it. And then the next day, the church came and brought them a whole Thanksgiving dinner, right? So there's this whole sort of story about even if you give away the last of what you have, that the universe, God will provide. So I had that side. And then I had this other side from my dad, which my dad is sort of like uses money for status. So having money, being able to, buy everybody a round of drink at the bar, or, donating money to charity and philanthropies was something my dad did very often, sometimes to the detriment of the family budget, which my mom would then go crazy because she would have to make more out of less. So it was this really weird kind of money mindset thing. But the one thing that my dad always taught me was that if you respect money, it will stay with you and seek you out. And so I learned a real healthy respect for having money, organizing money, keeping track of money, knowing how I'm spending money, spending on purpose, having a lot of purpose behind money. And I've never been afraid to ask for it for the most part, except for that time period where people started telling me I was pushy and that I was manipulating them into making purchases that they didn't want to make. And that's when I shied away, because I have a heart and I really didn't want to hurt people, but I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do.
Well, wait, let me just interrupt for just a quick second. Did you believe, because oftentimes, if those messages fall on the ears of someone that doesn't believe that, you just kind of like, you shake that off and you just keep moving on and you ignore it. However, it sounds like, was there a possibility that you bought into the idea that you're manipulating somebody, or you're kind of pushing through this area in the zone that you shouldn't be treading?
So is what you're asking me is, do I think that maybe that was a mindset mistake, or do I think I was being really manipulative? No, Doug, when people say to you, I never want to speak to you again because you're manipulative, you pretty much get the memo.
I got it. Well, again, part of it could be part of the way that you presented it, and part of it is
Absolutely.
your actually belief in how did you believe in the products and services that you were selling at the time? So it could have gone either way, at least in my mind.
It's yes and yes, right? It's yes and yes, and the very quality that makes me a really keen coach, right? Which is that sort of straight shooting, and I'm gonna really help you get what you say you wanted. Sometimes, like in that time period, I had more of a heart. And I think this is the truth here. It's like some people are wired to win. And I was willing to win at whatever cost, because winning was important. And what I had to learn was that the win has to be a triple win, right? So it has to be a win for the client, for the person that's in front of you. It has to have a positive impact for whoever touches the client, or if your client, whatever their ripple effect is in the world, that ripple effect has to be taken into account. And then of course it has to be a win for us. We can't just give away the store out of guilt or shame, or not wanting to charge, or afraid that we'll be manipulative or unliked or whatever. So there's a lot that goes around the whole money mindset issue. But what I've found is, as long as I am really, really, truly listening to the person who's in front of me, and I care most about getting them to the right solution for them, whether that's me or not, then everything goes very well. So it's just about believing that if you help enough other people get where they're going, you'll get where you're going.
So we've been asking people about their sales mantra or their sales personality, like what if you had to say, like boil it down to how you sell. It sounds like when you got into selling, it was for, again, the winning, making money, doing a good job. And there were components that you had to learn along the way to make peace with, or to alter and adjust the way that you were doing things to, like you said, to have a triple win. So if you were to point out like what you think your sales style or sales mantra is, what would it be?
There's a million assessments out there. I know you had Gitmer on, so I'm a pit bull. Like if you do sales dogs, right? So I am upfront and loyal. So I think for me, where it really comes down is I am unafraid I'm unafraid to have the ask made. I'm unafraid to solve the problem. I'm unafraid to do those things. And I'm just a lot better at the empathy piece on the front end, where it's really about trying to understand where is somebody, where do they want to be? What are the gaps and the bottlenecks and roadblocks they perceive between here and there, and finding out what's important to them, and then crafting a solution that leaves them feeling seen, heard, and understood, regardless of the decision that they make, whether they decide to work with you or not. Giving people what they need at the moment and not prescriptively deciding on our part as the salesperson, this is what you need, so this is what I'm going to try to sell you. It's an influence process, right? So I would say that.
So how do you get somebody out of the transaction game and into the relationship game? Because it sounds like that's really what that process is all about. It's not just about, earning a commission, which certainly it could be if you're, either a salesperson or you own a company. But so how do you get out of transactions and put yourself more into the relationship space? Is that just experience, training? What do you say?
Well, like anything, Doug, the pain of staying the same has to outweigh the pain of the change, right? So the first thing starts with that awareness of what's my refund rate. So I no longer have a refund rate because I'm making good decisions with my client for what's best for them, right? So that's number one is you've got to take a good hard look at, how many sales are you losing? What's your conversion rate and what is your refund rate? Because if your conversion rate isn't what you want it to be and your refund rate is high, there's a good chance that you're selling your products and services to people that aren't a good fit, but you don't care or you don't see it. You haven't done the consultative work. I think coaching has really helped me a lot, having a process for that. So I went to Bill Barron's workshop, my God, like 8 years ago. And the notes from that still sit on my desk. And before I get into any sales conversation, I pull out those notes and I refresh myself on what is my sincere purpose with this individual, and what is the relationship that I want to build with them over what do I want to sell them, right? What do I want to know about them? What do I want to find out? I think that's really key. And then the other thing, I know this is going to sound really weird, but a lot of times when we're having sales issues, and you're a driver type, you're a type A, high D on the disc, sales dog, pit bull, that's the personality that you have. The empathy skill is kind of missing, and the ability to really tune in and read and check in how someone across the table or across across cyberspace is feeling. And I coached on that for 3.5 years on learning how to identify emotions and nuanced emotions so that I could be a better consultant to the people who sit across from me.
So somebody that is either a brand new salesperson or really don't think that they sell because they're just kind of selling their ideas. We all sell, we've said it many times. If you're not selling a product or service, you're still selling your ideas to somebody. Tell me a little bit about what advice that you would share with them. Is there early on in you want to build relationships with people, you want to convert people to step closer to you and actually buy an idea or buy the service that you have, you must do these things, or you must absolutely do this one thing. What is that one thing, or what are those things that you share with them as advice?
If I had to pick the one thing, it would be to accurately tap into the point of pain and understand it from the perspective of the potential client, from the prospect, right? Because, for example, a chiropractor would say that the problem is I have subluxations in my spine, but I just have shoulder pain, right? So really getting tapped into where people are at before I shell out the expertise that I have and tell them all about how I'm going to fix them. But they haven't really told me, that they need to be fixed. They haven't made that admission, like I need help yet, because it's a sales conversation. And they haven't told me what they want, and they haven't told me what they are willing and unwilling to do. So I think the biggest pieces of it are, where are you now? Where do you want to be? What have you tried? What are you currently doing that's not working? What are you willing to do and not willing to do? And what would be this ideal outcome? And what are you willing to invest of your mind and your body and your spirit and your wallet? Like, what are you willing to invest to get this done? How important is that? And then once they tell you all those things, the next question is, help me understand why all of that matters. Like, what is all this for? Because we're all doing things that are tied to a greater goal. We're doing things that are tied to something more meaningful than just trying to buy a product or service. We're trying to accomplish something. And so when I can get a sense for what people are trying to accomplish and why, then I can begin to say something like, based on what I've heard, I feel like this is what you're trying to accomplish. And I believe I can help you, or Doug can help you, or JJ can help you, right? So I believe that I have a solution, and then always getting permission. Could we spend some time talking about that? So that possible solution. I have a mentor, her name's Hazel Walker, and she says, people will pretty much let you do anything to them as long as you get their permission first. So, and I even think this is part of this handler sales system, right? It's like every time you're going to move to the next part of the conversation, you're getting permission to move to the next conversation, to take the conversation a little deeper, rather than just like coming at it like a ballistic missile, right? So really, I believe if you're going to do a great conversation, 40 minutes of an hour ought to really be spent asking great questions and listening.
That's good advice. I want to know what the transition was. I know you just said you did a couple of years coaching to help with the empathy piece, because you went from what sounds like you were selling other people's products, and then at some point maybe you were selling your own. Was there a shift for you when you went from selling someone else's products to selling your own intellectual property and coaching and programs?
I would say, yeah, because when you're selling a product that people use, right? Like in my case, I was selling skincare products. So people wash their face, or they brush their teeth, or that, they use stuff, and they can buy it from you, or they can buy it elsewhere. And you don't necessarily have to have a lot of relationship to do that. But when you start talking about, I'm going to sell my coaching program, I'm going to start selling my support. Yeah, I really did have to go through an evolution for that. Again, the secret for me was I studied with Callan Rush and Justin Livingston, and I hired Bill Barron, and then I studied with Deborah Woods. And, I really had to learn the skill sets that I didn't learn them in my home, and I didn't learn them in school. And I understood that the distance between where I was and where I wanted to go was a mindset and a bunch of skills that I just didn't have. And gaining the skill sets made the difference. I also think, you guys, that one of the things that has also made it easier for me is having really good partners and a good referral network of people that I know, like, and trust, that when someone says, hey, my top of mind problem, for example, is that my mom has Alzheimer's and I can't think of anything else until I get her settled, I have somebody I can introduce her to and say, well, go meet Joe. And then when you get that settled, come on back. And I know Joe's going to send her back. So for me, it's just having those partners that will help you solve the top of mind problem, because the problem you solve may be number 3 or 4 on the list. And if you're the go-to person that solves problems 1, 2, and 3, you're probably going to get the business when they're ready to solve problem number 4. And that's where your expertise is. So all of those things, I think, have really, really helped me. But more than anything, I think 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them appropriately.
Good advice. Now let's move into the podcast space and selling on podcasts, and whether it be successes you've had selling on your podcast, or success in you buying from a podcast, or witnessing bad selling on a podcast. What do you think the most effective use of selling on a podcast is, or you've witnessed or done yourself?
Listen, I think there are a lot of them. So we'll just talk about why I'm even on this podcast right now. And that's because I met Doug at the New Media Summit, and he created the BizWiz podcast. We got done with my little segment, and he said, well, what are you doing about podcasting? And I was like, oh, I totally want to launch one in January. And I didn't have what I needed. So, so I invested with Turnkey, and that's why I'm podcasting, because Doug asked the question. So are you going to podcast? Do you want to be a podcaster? It was a pretty simple question, and the answer was yes. And he shared with me everything. Here's everything you're going to need to do. Do you want help with that? Yes, I do. It was pretty simple. Then I put it off and put it off and put it off. And long story short, but here we are. For me personally, my podcast is multi-dimensional, and I really use it a lot to feature my joint venture partners. So when I'm going to promote somebody on a launch, or I'm going to promote somebody, that's doing a Facebook challenge or whatever, I'm going to bring them on my podcast. I'm going to interview them, and I'm going to use that podcast with my network to be like, hey, listen to this great episode with JJ Flazanes, right? She's awesome. You want to listen. And that's going to be part of my promotional piece. And so the monetization comes on the back end when I'm doing joint ventures.
I want to just spend just a quick moment about when, talking about this, because I think that you were no stranger to sharing just to the world in general, the struggles, or at least the challenges that you had when it came to podcasting. And as it relates to, okay, how do I convert my show into money, or how do I convert my community into dollars or sales? What's some of the stuff that you really didn't even think about when it came to podcasting? Because oftentimes people get into podcasting and their monetization tool in their mind is, I'm going to grow a huge community. I'm going to sell advertising and sponsorship space. I'm going to make money on my show that way. And maybe I'll be able to move some products and services through to my community. What's some of the stuff that you thought originally was your plan versus the reality of, this is actually what I'm doing with my show? Because again, you've been very vocal, and I appreciate your voice when it comes to, this is not at all what I thought it was going to be. Here's the benefit, and here's the stuff I'm still working on.
Okay. So let's talk about why I started a show, Doug, because it was all about me. I didn't have a monetization strategy when I started. I just wanted to have a podcast because I wanted to be an icon. Like, that was pretty much it,
that's
right?
Right. That's right.
I wanted to be an icon of influence. You had to have a podcast. I wanted to hang out with you guys. For me, it was about getting access to a community that I really adored. Like, you guys as podcasters just captured my heart. And I was like, I want these people to be my friends. And the way to be your friend was to do a podcast. So I did, right? Now, after you start doing it and you start realizing, like, okay, wait a minute, this podcasting thing, like, it takes time, and it actually takes money to produce it. And, you start thinking about, what does it cost maybe to produce an episode? And, if you're producing it yourself versus maybe if you're having somebody else produce it, I've heard people say, like, it costs me $50 an episode because they're kind of doing stuff themselves, all the way to, it cost me $300 an episode based on whatever services they're pouring in behind that. And so when you start to think about the fact that you're bringing people on your podcast as a gift to them, they're not gifting you necessarily with their presence. It's really an investment in them. You have to start thinking about, well, what is the ROI that I want from that weekly investment in producing my podcast? Whether it's $20, whether it's $200, whether it's $2,000 is irrelevant. It's really knowing what your ROI is. And so I struggled with that. I had a really hard time with it because I didn't come up with a monetization strategy beforehand. And even when you and I talked and we created the questionnaire, and we got good feedback and good information, but I didn't really know how to use that to create sales. And then the other day, it wasn't the other day, it was like 6 months ago. I'm talking to Jenny, and she's like, well, you're just not asking the magic question. And I said, Jenny, if I knew the magic question, I would ask the stupid magic question. And she goes, it's super easy. You stop the record button, you go, so what other questions do you have for me? And I was like,
yeah, she's become the queen of being able to convert conversations into
cash,
dollars,
yep.
But yeah, conversations into cash because of that one question. And it is an interesting question, because if you think about it, it's like, oh, well, what questions do I have for you? What questions do I have for you?
And if they say nothing really, for me, then I start looking at my, I've got that 5-step referral network, right? Where people have roles and they fulfill the role. And then I invest my time, talent, and resources in people based on the role that they're playing. So if I put somebody on my podcast, for example, that I think is going to be a really great referral partner for me, and I say, hey, so what questions do you have for me? And they go, yeah, nothing really. I'm like, okay, right back to the associate pool with you, right? Like, I'm not going to, if you have no questions for me, or you don't say, what, this was really great, and we didn't get a chance to talk about you, let's set up an appointment, then I'm probably not going to cross promote, and I'm not going to put a lot of time, talent, and energy in that. But if somebody engages with me either as a joint venture partner or a referral source, I'm going to put more time and talent in that. And the other thing is for me that sometimes I think we don't ask because we make assumptions that what we have won't serve the person that we're talking to. So I might have an assumption about JJ that I would never ask her if she wanted to consider doing anything in my program because she's amazing and she's got this big list and she's got all these podcasts and she's just larger than life to me, right? And so I would never, I probably wouldn't be like, hey, JJ, you want to come to my 3-day event? I wouldn't do that. But to have her on a podcast and say, what other questions do you have? And for her to say, well, what do you do? Do you do events or masterminds? And then I can talk about it and have her say, oh, I might like to attend one of those. I might fall off my chair, but I would have gotten that. I would have gotten the outcome. Right. So a lot of times we don't ask because we make assumptions about the person in front of us as them either not being interested or not needing what we have, but we don't really know because we don't have that conversation. And that question just, it's so effortless to ask it. And it's so not pushy, right? Which was my reasoning for not asking any questions after a podcast as well. I don't want to be pushy or anything.
Sorry, JJ. I know I asked you if you would ask the follow-up question to this, but I want to add something to that because very similar to, so what questions do you have for me? Because I'm in podcast production, for me, it's such an easy question to ask at the end of the interview. And I've oftentimes done this right on the air, especially with people that I know the answer already. It's like, why is it that you don't have a podcast? So for me, like that kind of question can almost be translated into any, hey, so why is it that you don't have a copywriter or do you have a copywriter? Because it sounds like you really do have a thorough grasp of your language, but I don't see that on your podcast, or I don't see that on your website. So it just seems like there are so many great questions that could be boiled down into some simplistic terms if you are going for that guest to client sales strategy. And that could just be as it pertains to whatever it is that you do. Why don't you have that? Or why don't you do that?
Mm-hmm.
JJ?
Okay. Well, I'm just wondering.
Sorry. I just wanted to add that in there. Sorry.
You got right in there.
Yeah.
So in terms of people that are listening that they're podcasters and they want to get better at selling, in Virginia, you have a history and you've spent time, money, and passion and education and attention and focus, learning how to deliver a sales conversation and to do it in a way that's authentic, but still direct and still full of energy and passion and, wanting to serve the client and do it with empathy. It sounds like your podcast or people's podcasts that have possibly sold you, it's more of the joint venture conversations. Like you're using your podcast to just make the relationship. And then, like you said, the sales come on the back end, correct?
That's how I've typically used it on the Business by Referral podcast because I'm delivering value to the audience. And I do get people that say, hey, I heard your podcast. I want to come to your event. So I have had that happen. So it's just been kind of an authority building piece that's gotten eyes for me. We're launching Bad Girls on Business in January and with Jenny Bellinger and Michelle Nedelec. And that is going to be more on the interviewing people and finding out what their needs are and how any one of the three of us or more of us might be able to assist, right? Like, so that's really going to be a conversation about where you at, where you going, where do you see your, what's your vision, what's your mission, what's your purpose and impact. And we're going to talk about that and what help do you need to get there is going to be kind of the conversation. And I think that one will be a little bit different. I think there will be follow-up sales conversations when we discover throughout the conversation, the stumbling blocks and roadblocks and the gaps that we all face when we're building businesses from scratch and scaling businesses. Because you can have the conversation about build your business, start your business, build your business, scale your business. And those are the conversations we're going to have. And certainly needs are going to arise from that. So we'll either be joint venturing, we'll be referring, or we'll be solving the problems ourselves.
What advice would you give podcasters that aren't coming at this with the strength and determination and clarity and presence that you have? So somebody who, let's say, is a little on the shyer side, maybe a little bit insecure, really afraid of this whole conversation. They may understand the nuts and bolts of it, but they don't really feel comfortable yet. What would you tell them to do to get comfortable?
I would say find a system that resonates with you. So get a coach. And not a whole bunch of coaches. I will say this, that, I worked with Doug and Strick for a full year. I didn't jump in for 90 days and then jump off. I stuck with it for a little bit over a year, right? To really get my feet wet and really understand it. Same thing with Justin and Callan, same thing with Jay. So like you really need a program that will give you the confidence to do it. Number 2 is practice, 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 practice. You just have to keep having the conversations and write them down if you need to and go through the checklist. And I think the last thing is get out of your own way. And either, I'm a bit of a bull in a china shop. I'm quite direct, and I don't generally take no for an answer without calling it out as fear or whatever. But the same fear of being rejected or being not well received doesn't really matter what your behavioral style is or your personality type. So the way to get out of not wanting to be pushy or not wanting to be salesy or not wanting to be is to decide, how do you want to be, and to show up in that skin for that person. They're in your space because God put them there. And one of the things that I always remember, and if you're whatever you call the universal force in the world, right? Like love, God, whatever. That universal force works through us and transmits answers to other people. So for me, understanding that the person in front of me has prayed for something, wants something, has something on their heart, and I'm a conduit to that, makes it a sacred process. So for me, there's something sacred about the sales conversation, and I consider that I have been asked or commissioned by the universe, by source, by God, to deliver an answer to the person that's in front of me. And I can only do that by hearing what they have to say and then responding with empathy, compassion, love, kindness, and intention to move them to their next step.
I think that if we're all connected to that and that's what we feel and emanate, then there's really nothing. You're just having a conversation and being of service and trying to help someone. So let's talk about where people can find more of you. Let's talk about your show and then the things that you offer to help others.
Okay. My show is the Business by Referral podcast. It's on iTunes and Spotify and all the cool places that you can find it. And my website is Master Connectors with an S, masterconnectors.com. And there's all kinds of great resources there for you, including my Business by Referral blueprint and a number of great courses there. And the last thing that I'll say is that if somebody wants to just have a quick virtual cup of coffee and talk with me, I am happy to have a conversation. My calendar website is thedivaIsIn.com.
Hey, Virginia, I know we didn't spend any time preliminarily discussing this with you. I'm hoping I can put you on the spot just for a quick second, because I know that you're a fan sometimes of technology and how technology works. Yeah. I'd love to just spend just a quick moment talking about, and as it relates to selling, what technology, whether it's inside your podcast, outside of your podcast, just in the whole sales world, what's a piece of technology that you can't live without or that really helps you day to day?
Zoom.
Yeah, right now, right?
Zoom. Well, a couple of things that I use Acuity scheduling. Mm-hmm. I really kind of dig that. There's some simpler ones out there. That's the one you guys started me on, so that's the one I've been using ever since. Mm-hmm. So I do like Acuity. And I'll tell you what I really, really, really like is Josh Turner's Connect 365.
Yeah, Jenny Bellinger talks about that a lot too. What's the benefit of that?
So it is an email. It's the email deliverability is really nice, and his training is really amazing. So it's a system that you use to nurture your inner circle contacts. So for me, there's about 50 people that you're always going to want to be nurturing. I call them your advocates, your ambassadors, and your affiliates. Mm-hmm. And the reason I like it is because it gets delivered through your Gmail, and Josh's email open rate is about 65% or something. Mine's more like 90. Whereas if I send stuff through Benchmark One or Infusionsoft or, Aweber, like some sort of an email delivery system, I get a much lower deliverability and a much lower open rate. So I just really like it because it's much for nurturing the personal relationships, clients, for example. So all of my communication with my clients, I don't do that the direct communication through Infusionsoft. I do it through Connect 365 because it comes through my Gmail. So it's a way to make your Gmail like an autoresponder.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, Virginia, Jenny had been telling me about that. I just have not had a chance to look further. One of the things that you said, which was really cool, though, you talked about nurturing that inner circle of advocates, affiliates, and what was the third A that you mentioned?
Advocates, ambassadors, and affiliates.
Yeah, that is really, really a great way to refer to the people that are in your inner circles. So again, as you're listening to this, just keep in mind the attitude that Virginia presents to the people that are in that inner circle. Your advocates, your affiliates, and your ambassadors are probably the areas where you don't have to have 1,000 customers. You would like to have 1,000 customers, but you're not going to have 1,000 referral sources of customers. They're probably going to come from those advocates, those affiliates, and those ambassadors. That's a great way to label them.
Yeah, and that's part of my whole Get Connected system, right? It's the idea that people, I mentioned it before, people have roles, and we oftentimes think that people should do certain things, and we expect from them things that they aren't doing. So what I prefer to do is I like to look at it and say, like, okay, Doug promotes me, so he's an advocate, or Doug introduces me to other people who will promote me, so he's an ambassador, right? He walks around and says, hey, Virginia, come and look at this network. How about that network, right? Taking me to foreign networks, if you will. And then affiliates are people that are really dedicated to helping you make money. So based on their behavior is how you nurture them, the kind of information you send out to them, what you offer them, and how you invest in them. And oftentimes, if we're investing properly in the proper ratios with people according to what they're willing to do for us, the relationships are pretty effortless and we get great results. It just happens when I have people that are willing to talk about me, but I want them to bring me money, that they don't. And if I spend the wrong amount of time, then I don't get great results. So yeah. And you need about 50 total. It's 5 affiliates, 15 ambassadors, and 30 advocates will get you pretty well into the 6 figures, probably around between $150,000 and $250,000 without much effort.
Well, little known secret, if you have not heard Virginia on our Something to Whine About podcast, also she does play a guest role in that podcast as well. And
Woohoo!
she does sell her wine drinking capabilities on that show. Virginia, thank you so much. JJ, any final words, or you have a follow-up question to ask?
Well, and in terms of the numbers that you just laid out, I think that's really helpful, because as before you laid them out, I was thinking I'm tired because that's one of the reasons I don't network. In terms, like, I find the right fits and then I just sort of stay there, right? And if a relationship works, then I don't need to go find more of them. And now I understand you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So it's always nice to have, different relationships and different opportunities, because you're never done. And if you believe in your products and service, then of course you want more people to know about them. But it was really helpful to hear you break it down in terms of numbers, because if someone's shooting for a goal of how many joint venture partners, affiliate partners do I have, that if I have really good ones, I'm in talks with someone right now for a future relationship where, literally I'll be busy for the rest of my life with this one relationship if it goes where I think it's going. So I don't need to find 10 of those, because I have, to start anyway, because I can't scale if I had 10. I have to start with the one, because the one brings a lot. But again, to wrap our head around, and people that are listening, what are my goals? What do I, because if it's exhausting for me, who I'm not a born salesperson, I want to leverage. I teach law of attraction. I believe podcasts are great leverage. I want to do less of the chicken dinner networking time. I want to do less of the meeting every Tom, Dick, and Harry to have a conversation. And I want to narrow it down to efficiency and attraction and the right fit before I spend any time trying to find if it's a right fit. You know what I mean? So I think that was really helpful. And I know that you do teach a lot of this. So again, I believe it was masterconnectors.com.
Yep.
Okay. And then Business by Referral podcast. So make sure everybody go check out Virginia. And if you're hearing this show before our launch, come back to our launch on December 2nd, because she's going to have a really special gift for you too.
I am.
I want to add this too, JJ, and this is a future episode that you and I will probably be recording, because as soon as Virginia was talking about the process of getting the referrals, I was thinking about, man, there is such a difference between you like the deliverables and I like the sales process. It's like, I don't like product delivery. I like the beginning part. You want to get out of the sales part and into the product delivery as quickly as possible. I want to get out. I want to stay out of the delivery and put myself into the sales part so much more. So there's a whole episode in that, I think.
There's also something to really consider. And, JJ was talking about like eating rubber chicken and green beans, right?
Yeah.
That's eventing. It's not networking. JJ, what you do is networking, which is you strategically decide what your goals are. You look at what you have and what you need. You determine what the gaps are. You start looking around for the people in your network that have what you need. And then you go make relationship with them and say, hey, here's what I have to offer in terms of knowledge, support, networks, and resources. Do you need any of this to help you grow your business? And if someone goes, yeah, you go, that's cool, because I want some of that over there, right? So how about if we trade this for that, or we do this together, or we create a collaboration? That's networking. It's connecting with other people for the purpose of getting things done and for the advancement of humanity. It's not going to events and collecting business cards.
I understand that. And I did a lot of that. I did a lot of that to start my business. But yeah. I'm the person who, both my freshman year in college and my freshman year in high school, I'm the one who got to know everybody the first year and then sat back and let it all happen. Like I stopped trying or doing because I'd already made the connections, and then I just let life happen. That's why I don't network anymore. I think it's a complete waste of my time, because I end up, for me, because I don't need half the shit that's in the room, and the people in the room aren't the right people for me, which is why it doesn't make any sense. So I end up attracting, again, those relationships. And and I'm sure you would also agree that when you're in business long enough and you make a name for yourself, people know who you are. Those great referrals and networking that you did 10 years ago still are paying off today, if you're still doing the same thing, of course.
Well, yeah. And that's just why I make such a distinction between the process of connecting and creating literally a network, because a network works. Right. It's people that are working on each other's behalf versus, again, just that whole notion of being in a big room. And I don't know how much more time we have, but do we have more time? Because I have something I just wanted.
Yes, go.
Look, right now, one of the things that I've noticed, and I mean, no disrespect to anyone, but we had to pivot really quickly and get all these big online events on Zoom really quickly, right? And so we started seeing like people now that didn't have to travel, they didn't have to invest in a hotel. Like it was much more easy access to get on events that are billed as big connector events, right? And I've been on dozens of them since the pandemic hit. And one of the things that I noticed was that I was really, really, really tired, but I wasn't really getting anything. And I'm the freaking referral diva. Like I have a system for that. So what I realized is that during live events, the reason we ink deals is because I meet you, I love your energy, and then we eat lunch together, and then we meet for breakfast, and then we meet at the bar, and then we go out to the pool, and right, like we spend a lot of time at those large events with a small number of people. And that's why it seems to me that we need to find a balance between them meeting a whole bunch of people and collecting lots of names and emails, and then also having real relationships with them. And I created an event. We just did it last week and it worked. I was just super excited. It was just really all about digging in deep with people. And yes, having exposure to a number of people, but really having the opportunity to do deep dives with a smaller number of people for the purpose of getting stuff done. And I think we need to work towards that balance, because otherwise all of this going to all these events where there are hundreds and hundreds of people and just doing breakout room after breakout room, I think they're going to exhaust us and we're not going to get the ROI that we want, because we got to have a plan. And podcasting is the same way, right? It doesn't do you any good to just like put it out there and reach audiences and reach audiences and reach audiences. It really matters that you have a strategy and a plan, and that you know how you're going to close the gap and help people with what you're doing.
Absolutely. And that's the exact reason that Doug and I started our podcast mastermind, because there were too many podcasters who A, make no money from their show, and B, had no freaking clue what to do with their show, with their sales strategy, with their offers, with their audience, with their guests. And so again, I never thought, I say this every time, I never thought I'd be a podcast coach. And of course, but when you do something well and you don't even know that you're doing it, then you look around and other people aren't anywhere near that. And I don't mean that because I'm a small fish, but there are much, much bigger fish than me. But then when you're hanging out with a whole bunch of people podcasting and you see that no one's really doing anything and they're not moving the needle, this is why we did this show, Sales Training for Podcasters, because if you have a podcast and you have an audience, you're not selling, what's the problem? So, and again, and I'm not a natural salesperson. I've had to learn to be one. And, you've come in a little bit more natural, and Doug grew up in it and everything. So this is why we're having these conversations, to help educate and inspire and direct anyone listening to do something. Because if you aren't good at it and you're passionate and you have a message and you want to reach people, but you just don't know how to deliver the next step, then get some training. You need some help. Get a coach, do a program, find what works for you, resonate with whomever that's going to be. I don't act anymore until I feel so strongly that the resonance is absolutely right. And half the time, again, because I teach law of attraction, I end up just attracting the opportunity. So it'll just come my way. And I'm like, my God, that's just what I asked for. I just was looking for that. And now it's here. So to wrap up today's show, in terms of, there are several different ways to make money from your podcast. And one of them definitely is, and I think we've really hit this one today, the joint venture and relationship building you get from your podcast. And then what you do afterwards is where the sales happen. So we appreciate having you on, Virginia, because you're like one of the best people to talk about this, because I know that's what you do. That's what you did. That's what you do. That's what you're doing, more so than, let's say, me, or maybe even Doug. So we appreciate that your perspective will help people get new ideas for how they can make money on their podcast.
Thanks for having me, you guys. This was super fun.
Yeah, we loved having you, Virginia. And give a plug for that new show also. It's going to be called The Bad Girls on Business. Is that what it is?
So... this happened over a couple of bottles of wine, right?
No doubt.
So Jenny and I actually made it up on an airplane a while ago after we met you guys, because we thought Nice Guys on Business was so much fun. We were like, we should be the Bad Girls on Business. So the Bad Girls on Business podcast will be launching in January. We've already got 24 episodes all ready to get edited and drop them in the can. Where we've invited the Nice Guys on Business to visit with the Bad Girls on Business for our episode 0, to just kind of talk about how all of it came about and why we're doing what we do. And that is actually going to be part of a new membership site that I've created called the 6-Figure Success Academy. Ooh. And it's really going to be that place for people who are entering into business for the first time. They're kind of just hanging out the shingle. Maybe they're making $20,000, $30,000. It's been a side hustle, and they want to get some information and some support for how do I get closer to that 6-figure mark. And that's what the membership site's going to be about. And the Bad Girls on Business is going to be part of the fuel for that. And you and Strick don't know it, but we're going to invite you to be on the faculty of the academy.
Oh, I always like to be on faculty, board of directors. Do I get a meal card with that? Does that come along with
a meal card? Yeah, I'll send you some DoorDash. Okay, that's the best I could do for you right now. Although I was telling Michael that I've got this friend who lives in Sonoma and Napa area who has a limousine service and knows a ton of those sort of smaller hidden gem wineries up there. So, maybe I'll just refer your way into someplace cool.
I sense some wine tasting coming up in Virginia Muzquiz's future. Thank you, Virginia, for sharing on the show. We'll make sure we promote all of your shows, all of your businesses, all the things that you got in the show notes. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for listening to Sales Training for Podcasters. To get additional information and to access more amazing content that will boost your sales game, visit salestrainingforpodcasters.com. Hey, do us a favor. Rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, thanks for listening.